Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we need to do more ascent testing. No, I'm kidding. I couldn't keep that up. We successfully had an ascent test of this module in the last episode, and we successfully descended in the last episode. So, at this point, we need to be building the supporting structures for it. Now, we've already got the Eve module Charlie, which is this science rover here, which carries all of our non-in-place science and is intended to have people in there. Now, one thing that we don't have on this currently is an experiment storage module. The reason for that, of course, is because there's a storage module here. However, these docking ports, I'm 99% certain, are not at the right height. So let's go ahead and open up our Eve module Charlie, and we're actually going to make several variants of this as well. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to pop these wheels off. And we are instead going to put on some structural octagonal struts. And those are going to go into mirror symmetry mode. And we're going to put them there, as well as I want it to be like here, approximately. I'm just getting my bearings here, like here. And then another one basically centered here. It's not quite centered, it's slightly forward, but that should be okay. Next, we are going to go into robotics here. And I want to put in a hydraulic cylinder, although I want it to be a fairly small one, and I think our options on that are pretty limited. I think the 1P2 is the smallest that there is, and this guy is pretty big. I hadn't considered that. I hadn't considered that at all. This, might break what I had in mind. Or we might just have a tall rover. How tall would this rover end up being? My guess, pretty tall. So, we don't necessarily want it to be rotated like that. We would want it to be like this. Yeah, this would be real tall. Not necessarily the worst thing. No, I don't want it to snap there. Can you stop? Thank you. Not necessarily the worst thing. I mean, it's not ideal, to be sure. I think I'm going to scrap this idea. I'm going to scrap this idea. I'm going to put the wheels back the way they were, like this. This works fine. And I think all we're going to do is be able to change the elevation of the docking port. So, we don't have a lot of vertical height to work with here. That's definitely something to note. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a cubic octagonal strut like... we don't want mirror symmetry on here. We would have it be like here, although I'd want it to be relatively centered. We want snapping on. And then we would turn snapping off and bring it out a little bit. Actually, in a little bit, I feel like. Maybe to like here. And then we could put a hydraulic cylinder here, or we could attach it to a robot arm. That's something we could do. Just try to make a relatively small robot arm, kind of like this one, that is essentially two bits, instead of the like 3 or 4 bits that we had on the Minmus base. So we could very easily put in a rotation servo. Is this really the smallest rotation servo we've got? I think this one's a little smaller. Yes. Okay, so if we rotate that, that's how it rotates? That's not what I expected to have rotate, actually. So if we attach something out... I don't really want to attach that. If we attach this guy out here, hypothetically. Okay, that's fine. That's completely fine. We want a much, much smaller hinge. That's a much bigger hinge. That's a much, much bigger hinge. That's a huge hinge. We don't appear to have small hinges. That's unfortunate. That is very unfortunate. Outputs angular acceleration, huh? Okay. This is a relatively small hinge here, I guess. Yeah, that'll do. And then it would attach like this, and yeah, that should do the trick. That should do the trick all right, anyway. We can put it there. I would really love to see a smaller hydraulic cylinder than what we've got here. Unfortunately, that's the smallest that we have. So if we need to change the height further, then we can alter the angle here. So what we're going to need then is we're going to need another hinge on top of this. And then I'm thinking actually just the docking port on top of that. So what we do then is we have this, no, not this. We have the hinge be angled like this, right? And then if we need it to be a different height, we can always have it be rotated over this way and back in. That's fine. So we can have it be basically any height we want it to be, as long as it's within the range of, say, here up to here. If I can zoom up a bit. Okay, up to here. So that's relatively variable. Okay, I can work with that. And we'll have our target angle by default be at, say, 0. So let's go ahead and save this for now. And we're going to put this guy out on the pad. We need to do a quick docking test with this. So we're going to take this guy off of the pad to make sure that the pad is clear. And I'm going to make sure that the wheels are still set up the way I want them to be. We may not necessarily want steering on these back wheels, but ultimately I feel like it's fine. So we're going to go ahead and turn on those brakes. We're now clear of the pad. And this is a relatively low budget arm, for sure. I'm noticing that they've got like a double hinge here, which is a cool concept for sure. But we're going to go back to the Space Center for right now. And we're going to drop our ascent module onto the pad. And we're going to make sure that it's at an accessible height. That is our current goal. And that should be relatively easy to do. And once we have that, we'll have the basis for all 3 of the rovers that we're going to put in supporting this mission. Yeah, you heard me right. 3. Okay, so with these guys here, we then, of course, need to open up the ascent module. And we'll just put that out on the pad. We're not going to launch it or anything. This isn't even simulated. This is just, it's not going to go anywhere. We're not probably, I don't think we even will be able to revert this. We'll just have to pick it back up. So let's bring this on in, and here we are. We're going to make our way on up the pad here. And we can see our ascent module sitting on up there. Wonderful. Oh, our brakes are on. That would help. Okay, so up the hill we go. Fantastic. And we're just going to park ourselves right over here, if I can. There we go. And that'll quasi-do. I mean, it'll be interesting trying to get this correctly lined up, but it looks like this is going to be an acceptable height. So I'm going to turn our brakes on for right now, and this is obviously going to have to be at a target angle of -90. We're going to control from here. This angle is going to be a little bit awkward to achieve, but that is fine. We're going to bring it on in over here, and we're going to extend this guy right on out. Docking forces have now started up, and that's actually making this pretty simple, I think. I'm going to turn the brakes off, and let's see if docking forces just handle it. Oh, I messed it up a little bit there. I want to angle us over this way a little. This is what I was trying to do. I feel like we need to extend this up just a tiny bit more. There we go. Whoa! Whoa! We're jumping around. Can we not? You okay, physics? I mean, it broke all of our wheels. But that was a clear physics bug right there. That's not how physics is supposed to work. Overall, I'd say that this was a successful test of the docking mechanism, and we can just quick save beforehand and maybe turn on like no crash damage while docking, because that's just a bug. I'm not concerned about that. So we actually can revert that back, and we'll go ahead and do that. We'll revert that back. There's no real change that was made there, so that's fine. As I said, that's just a physics bug with it throwing the rover around. So we're going to recover the rover then, and that has proven to me that this will work. So we have a couple more things that we need to do. We need to design the additional rovers. So this is the non-deployable science version, right? So we're just going to then rename this and save it as Eve module deployable. Fantastic. And we're going to ditch... Actually, we're going to keep the battery bank in there. We're going to keep the communitron as well, although that will perhaps get moved, at least temporarily, and we'll ditch this service bay, for sure. We do want the KER on here. We're going to not need the large scanning arm. I don't think we'll want the external command seats. I will keep the headlights on there, just because I think they're funny. And overall, I think the rest of this is okay to stay. This is going to be the deployable science version. And so we're going to need the KER. I'm actually going to move to potentially the bottom, or maybe on top of this guy. So we could have the KER be, say, here, and then the communitron be there, and then have our deployables go in here, potentially. We're going to have to see just how many of these we're going to need to stack on top of each other. And we would want the smallest service module that we can get. Is this the cargo capacity version? No, this isn't. We want to be down here. We want the container modules. So the cargo storage unit is huge for this. Okay. So let's do a minor redesign here. We're probably going to need more power flow than what we've got here. I'm going to move the battery bank to the bottom of this. The KER I'll put there temporarily. I'm a little bit concerned about the battery bank's wheel clearance if it's placed there. So maybe we'll actually place the KER on the bottom where it uses much less space, and then put the rechargeable battery bank there. And try to put the cargo storage unit back here. The thing is huge. This thing doesn't need to dock up, though. So there's that. We could then put the rechargeable battery bank on top. And the question is, just how much do we want to attempt to store in this? Well, we're going to need pretty much everything here. We're going to need an experiment control station. We're going to need a weather analyzer. And this is probably overkill, to be clear. But we'll take a look at that once we get all this put in for now. So we'll get all of these guys in, and how much overall power are we going to need in this? I think I'll also have the EVA experiments in here. So how much overall power are we going to need for this? So this requires 1, 2... This generates power, of course. If it's deployed by our engineer, this will give like at least 3. But we need 3, 4, 5. Do I have the communitron in here? I don't think so. Okay, the communitron requires another one, so that's 6. I'm going to put in 2 more photovoltaic panels. Now, we obviously have plenty of room here. So, let's go into our utility section. Where did I find this? I can never remember. Oh yeah, the cargo storage unit here. So that only has 3 slots. However, we could pretty easily fit 2 of these guys in here. Now, I don't like this positioning, to be clear. This is definitely not what I was going for. I was going for something more along the lines of this. Other options are we could go for the 9 instead, and that might be acceptable. So let's see. Oh, this is plenty of capacity, actually. So we can move this guy over to here, like so. And then we could have the EVA kits be located in the Ascent module. That's fine. So this could then be moved on top of that, like so. And then all we would need for this one is, and I don't want that extended for now. All we would need for this one for power is a relatively small amount. So we would just have something along the lines of that for power. Now we're pretty empty up front, right? There's no doubt about that. This is going to be pretty back heavy. And I'm interested in seeing how that falls. Like, if this flips over in the landing, we're going to have problems. For sure. There's no doubt about that. If we look at our center of mass, you can see it's back behind this behind the middle wheels. So we may actually want to move the battery and the communications and the photovoltaic panels up to the front just to balance us a bit. Now, we're still heavier over here, for sure. What if we were to put in not a medium reaction wheel, a small reaction wheel like this? That will definitely move the mass forward a little bit. I think that's acceptable. Once this gets emptied, things will be much better, but I think this will be okay. Now, as far as how we're planning on delivering this, we'll get to that a little bit later on, but that's our deployable science there. So let's go ahead and save that, and then we're going to open up the Charlie rover, and this is, of course, our science rover, and we're going to have this be the Eve module mining. Excellent. So this module here is going to need the docking port. We will need to ditch all of this except for the communitron. We'll probably want one of those. And we can mount the communitron just right here for now. Will be okay. Want to make sure there's only one. And we'll ditch the scanning arm. The KER will go underneath as before. We'll ditch the command seats. And we're probably going to need more power and cooling than what we have here. But I would like to, on top of this, put in... The problem here is that the Convertitron 125s, they require 100 kilowatts of cooling. And they only have 75 kilowatts of max cooling, right? So these are never going to run efficiently at all. Which I think is a pretty major design oversight, honestly, on the part of the KSP devs. I feel like you should be able to effectively cool a Communitron 125. You can a 250, but that's a big boy. So we're going to have to use a 125. Now, the Drill-O-Matic Juniors are in much the same situation, right? Actually, no, they can be effectively cooled. So let's put on a pair of Drill-O-Matic Juniors. That would be something along the lines of that in a fairly futile attempt to get our weight evenly distributed. I feel like we should try to move the Convertitron, like try to move all of this to be a little more centered. About like that. It's not going to be pretty. And then we could put in simply a ore holding tank in the back. So just like a radial holding tank positioned like this or something. That's definitely the angle I was going for. Good job, KSP. Good job. Okay, so something along the lines of this. Now, we're definitely going to need some cooling on this, as well as some power. So, we will put in... Actually, how much power are we going to need? The Convertitron 125 requires... The Convertitron 125 requires how much power? Okay, so we're going to need 75 plus 100. So 175 kilowatts is the max cooling that we can make use of. So let's take a look at what we've got available here. So the thermal control systems have decent thermal transfer. Okay. We could put in small thermal control systems here and maybe attach them like here and hope that we have good heat transfer. Like that. We'll test it, of course. And then move it. Actually, I want to attach it to the battery specifically and then move it up a little bit and over a little bit. About like that. In theory. Okay, and then power, how much actual power are we going to need? So we need 175, or actually we didn't look at the actual power wattage. So 0.1, so 0.2 in total with our thermal control systems, or no. It's this one, 1.5 per minute. Okay, so that's 3 per minute. And then if we go in here, our Convertitron is going to require... something like 30 per second. So our cooling is going to be fairly irrelevant. 30 per second, and then the Drillmatic Junior will require somewhere around the lines of... well, we'll call it 1 per second. So about 33 per second is what we're going to need. So if we look at a Gigantor, that puts out 24.4. 2 Gigantors would do the trick. They would also be overkill. These guys output 1.6. I think we're going to have to go for like 2 Gigantors. And we'd mount those, say, up here. Maybe a little higher than this, but... I mean, it's not going to be pretty, right? But... it'll do, in theory. Okay, so let's run a quick test of this on... we'll probably simulate it on Eve, actually, now that I think about it. We may as well, right? Under simulated conditions. So let's take it on over there. It's not going to be particularly difficult to do in a simulated environment. In a real environment, on the other hand... okay, so we're going to ease it to ground, so we shouldn't need no crash damage, in theory. We're taking it over to Eve, and we're going to set position on Eve. Pitch of 90... actually, a pitch of 0 should work here, I think. Altitude, sure, that looks fine. Let's give it a go. We don't seem to have physics eased to the ground properly. Let's revert that back to launch here. And let's just try elevating it ever so slightly. I think it was just too close to the ground. It just instantly popped the front bit. Which isn't ideal, to be sure. So we will have this be at an altitude of like 5. Okay. Let's give this a go, under theoretical proper conditions. Now, that's a thing. To be sure, that is a thing. Okay, what if we had SAS on, though? So let's actually revert that back again and make sure that SAS is on first. One thing that I didn't think of, and I should have, is that basically no matter where you are on Eve, day or night, you are going to not really have solar flow. So we may not be able to run these solar arrays, but that's one of the reasons why I'm testing this. So that should be fine. We'll ease this to ground, make sure our SAS is on, and we'll set this position. I don't know if we have much for SAS, though. We're likely to tip over again, I think. We're pretty top-heavy. I'm not surprised by this, to be clear. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's fine. It's not fine, but it's expected. So the next question is, if we extend this solar panel, what kind of power flow do we actually have? It's saying blocked by Eve. Is that because we are on the night side of Eve? We're technically just inside the Terminator here. So I'm going to time warp here. And we'll see once we're in daylight, which in theory we are. Insufficient resource abundance. I mean, we're not trying to do anything here, but we do have some energy flow here. That's actually quite pretty. We have some energy flow here, but it's not a lot. So let's take this back and let's make a couple of alterations. Alteration number 1. I want to ditch the Gigantors. Do we have RTGs? We do not. Let's hop out of here. And let's go see what we would need for RTGs. We might have to do a science mission to make this happen, because this is the only one that needs a large power flow. So that's good to know. Let's hop into the research here, R&D, and RTGs are way over here. That's a long ways away. Okay, so we should plan to not have RTGs then. So how are we going to pull this off? That is the question that I will leave you on. It is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we're going to see how exactly we want to tackle the tipping problem with our mining rig, as well as the energy flow issue. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and I will see you all next time.